Welcome back to our class on environmental studies. So for today's lecture, we will discuss on valuing the environment. So the image in the middle is actually Great Barrier Reef located in Queensland, Australia. Okay, so Great Barrier Reef used to contribute 5.7 billion per year to the Australian economy, and it also provided 69,000 jobs to its people. However, since 1995, Great Barrier Reef has lost more than half of its coral due to warmer seas driven by climate change. For your information, forest and sea act as carbon sink. So what is carbon sink? Carbon sink has the ability to absorb carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. So many scientists found all types of coral had suffered a decline across the world's largest reef system. So the disappearance of coral reef from our planet could lead to a domino effect of mass destruction. So many marine species will definitely vanish after their only source of food, which is the coral, disappear forever. So what happened to us if, let's say, corals and fish are gone? Definitely our source of protein will also be gone, right? So in this chapter, we will learn the methods on how we want to value the environmental good. Okay? Environmental quality is a public good. For instance, when we talk about fresh air, everyone can enjoy it without competing for it. It is also a non-marketed good. It means that it is not traded in the market. So there is no demand for environmental good, which lead to non-revelations of preferences. So what do I mean by non-revelations of preferences? It means that everyone is not willing to reveal their preference, how much they really need this environmental good. So since there is no market, definitely there is no price tags on environmental good. Why is that? There are many issues to describe to explain this condition. The first one is that how to include such goods or services in a cost-benefit analysis. Should we put the value of 0 to the environmental quality? For instance, when we talk about fresh air, if let's say we put the value of 0 as if like the fresh air is not important or not essential for us. So if let's say we cannot breathe in a fresh air, can we survive? Definitely no, right? Another issue is that how to decide appropriate Pigovian tax for pollution that affect our environment. It is hard to somehow set the tax, right? If let's say our environment are affected by the pollution. Next issue, how to value environmental amenities on the balance sheet. So this will give a lot of trouble to the accountant. It is hard to put the value in the balance sheet. And how to work out appropriate compensation. For instance, if let's say we have the issues of oil spill. So it is hard to set up the compensation. And the last one, what is one way government can decide how much to pay for ecosystem services? So it is very hard to deal or to work on the value for environmental good. That's why environmental good has no market, right? Valuing the environmental quality. Total economic value can be divided into two. The first one is use value. So under use value, we have consumptive as well as non-consumptive. The second one is non-use value. So we have a few terms to explain the non-use value. So let's look at the use value. Okay, the first one is consumptive or direct. It means that we can consume the value directly. For instance, lake. So individual can go swimming to consume the value directly, while fishermen can catch fish for commercial purposes. So how about the non-consumptive? Let's take the same example, which is lake. People can enjoy the lake view without consuming it directly, right? So now let's focus on the non-use value. The first term is existence value or intrinsic value. So this is the benefit gain without physical interaction. For the use value, we need to have a physical interaction. While for the non-use value, even without the physical interaction, we still can get benefit out of it. So what is the example? For instance, the existence of certain species. So if you still remember in the previous discussion, I have mentioned about Great Barrier Reef. So some people will feel happy by knowing that there are different types of species of flora and fauna in the Great Barrier Reef with different colors. So we feel happy by knowing the existence of these species. Okay, so the next one, we call it bequest value. So what is it? So bequest value means that basically we concern for the interest of the future generation. The examples is like reserve forest. We don't use it because we concern that the future generation will get the benefits out of it. Okay, and the last one is altruistic value. This is the satisfaction gain when other humans benefit from it. For instance, bamboo. We may not use it, but when we know that the other parts of the world are using it, we feel happy, we feel satisfied that this bamboo can give the benefits to some people. Okay, so you have to know that some of these terms may be overlap to each other or may explain the other concept as well. Okay. According to John Crutilla, there are many persons who obtain satisfaction from mere knowledge that part of the wilderness North America remained, even though there would be a pull by the prospects of being exposed to it. Okay? For direct use value, contact with resources allow observations of behavior in the markets to infer the strengths of our preference. Let's take the previous example on lake. If let's say the lake is being polluted because of the oil spill, definitely we will have to do something because we want to go for swimming. So it will tell the strengths of our preference on the lake. Indirect use value, the quantity become more difficult to measure. So we need to have the cause and effect relationship to be estimated. For instance, because of the oil spill, it cause or it has an effect of bad smell to the surrounding. So because of this effect, definitely we have to do something to treat it. So then we need to estimate the unit value through observed market behavior or more indirectly if it is not marketed. And the last one for the non-use value, the quantity predictions are difficult and no link to markets or other behavioral observation to understand the preference strength. So in this case, it is hard for us to quantify the non-use value because we didn't use it. While for the direct and indirect use, we still can infer, we still can quantify it because we have some contact with the resources. Okay? Recognizing how society values environmental resources help to identify social benefit for policy proposal. But how to assign dollars or ringgit to our environmental good? In other words, how to put the price tags on our environmental good? Any idea on how to do it? Valuation approaches. We have market valuation. So under market valuation, the price will act as a signal to the demand and the supply side. We also have the non-market valuation, and it can be divided into revealed preference as well as stated preference. So under the revealed preference, by looking at the existing market, it will tell our preference, and it is suitable to estimate the use values only. While for the stated preference, it is the survey base, and normally we have to come out with a hypothetical markets, and it is suitable to estimate the total economic values. It means that we can use it to estimate the use as well as the non-use values. Okay, so under stated preference, we will have contingent valuation as well as choice experiments. While under revealed preference, we have a few things: travel cost, hedonic price, averting expenditure, and the last one is production function techniques. So production function techniques will not be covered in this chapter. It is basically wanted to examine how the change in environmental condition will affect our production costs. Okay, so these are the approaches in estimating the environmental value. Theory of environmental valuation. Let's assume that the environmental goods enter into our utility function. So our utility is a function of income as well as environmental goods. Here is our indifference curve. What is indifference curve? It is a combination of marketed goods and environmental goods in which the individuals are indifferent. So for the indifference curve, the further we are from the origin, so here is the origin, the higher our utility is. So if we compare utility 0 with utility 1, utility 1 will give us a better or higher utility. So suppose initially we are at point A. Okay, so our maximum willingness to pay for the increase in the environmental quality from E0 to E1 is this area B to C. Okay, so suppose now initially we are at point B. So at this point B, our environmental goods or environmental quality is good, right? So our minimum willingness to accept for a reduction from E1 to E0 is actually this area D to A. Okay, now my question is, why the willingness to accept is greater or larger than the willingness to pay? So we will discuss this question during the class time. Okay, let's discuss on the contingent valuation method. It is a survey-based stated preference technique that asks people about their willingness to pay or willingness to accept for a reduction in the environmental quality. So it is mostly used to estimate the use or non-use values. So there are a few applications on the contingent valuation method. The first one, it can be used to estimate the air and water quality improvement. It can also estimate the preservation benefits of wilderness. It can be used to estimate the benefits of outdoor recreation opportunities, benefits of improvements in public utility reliability, and to estimate the environmental damages made by companies or anything. Okay, so normally we can use the contingent valuation method. So let's look at the applications of contingent valuation method, or we call it CVM. In 1989, Exxon Valdez hit rocks in Prince William Sound. So there was a big oil spill, and it is considered as one of the most devastating human-caused environmental disasters. The two images on your right side could tell how terrible the condition was. So the Alaska government commissioned a contingent valuation survey, and the result indicated that the company should pay compensation, and the compensation should be more than $2.5 billion plus the cleanup costs. Okay? If you want to conduct the contingent valuation method or CVM, here are the steps that you have to follow. The first one is that you have to find the focus group. If we are talking about the pollution in the Gombak River, perhaps those who are living in Gombak area should be your focus group instead of interviewing the whole Malaysian. So you also have to consider about the survey method, whether you wanted to do face-to-face, via mail, phone, social media, and so on. You also have to consider about the sampling method so that your result will be representative. You can think of using simple random sampling, systematic, stratified, or cluster method. The next one, you have to create a survey instrument. We call it questionnaire. So in your questionnaire, you have to explain the purpose of your study. So you can say the purpose of my study is to find out how much people are willing to pay for the improvement in the Gombak River, and so on. And you also have to ensure the confidentiality of the answers of your respondents. The next one, you have to identify the users and attitudes towards environmental good or towards the Gombak River, because you wanted to know their willingness to pay. So you can ask this kind of question. Are you familiar with Gombak River? How frequent do you visit the Gombak River? Okay, so it will tell their willingness to pay for the improvements in Gombak River. The next one, you have to describe the problems in the layman terms. Please don't use any scientific terms because not many people will understand them. So you can also include photos to show the severity of the problem, and you can also estimate the dates of severity. For instance, you can tell your respondents, if let's say we didn't do anything, so in 10 years time the Gombak River will be a dead river, and so on. Okay, so you can also propose a solution. So when you wanted to propose a solution, you have to tell the difference before and after the implementations of your solution. For instance, before we do nothing, so here are the conditions of our Gombak River. So after doing this kind of solution, so the Gombak River perhaps will become nicer and better. Okay, the next one, you also have to propose a payment vehicle. So what is the payment vehicle? This is the methods of payment. How can they pay? If let's say they wanted to improve the conditions of the Gombak River. For instance, perhaps via an increase in tax or utility bills, or perhaps voluntary donation. The next one, you have to ask their willingness to pay. Okay, so you can say, how much are you willing to pay for the increase in the Gombak River? Perhaps RM1 and so on. The next one, you also have to ask the follow-up question for protest bid. So what is protest bid? So normally some people may not be willing to pay for it for many other reasons. So you have to ask the question. If let's say they refuse to pay for it, so you have to ask, why do you refuse to pay for the improvements in the Gombak River? And the last one, you have to ask the respondents' characteristics, especially the income. Because if let's say they are coming from poor family and they are willing to pay such a very large amounts of money, so it is impossible. So we have to know their income to know their willingness to pay. Okay, so these are the steps that you have to follow or to ask. These are the examples of different types of willingness to pay question. The first one is called as open-ended. So here you will ask, what is your maximum willingness to pay for the improvements of Gombak River, for example. So this kind of question is difficult to be answered, and it will result to high non-response rate, because it is hard for people to answer how much, what is the maximum that they are willing to pay for something, right? So it is so hard to answer this kind of question. Second types of willingness to pay question is called as bidding game. So you can ask a sequence of question with increasing amounts until they say no. Okay, for instance, you ask, are you willing to pay RM1 for the improvements of Gombak River? When they say yes, you will ask, are you willing to pay RM2 until they say no. If let's say you ask, are you willing to pay for RM10? They say no, then 10 is not the answer. Perhaps before 10, they are saying yes to 8. So what is the risk for this kind of question? We will discuss about this answer during the class time. The next one, we call it payment ladder. So the respondent is asked to take amount that they are willing to pay. So they have to cross the amount that they are not willing to pay. So it means that they are given the box. So this is RM1, and then another box is RM2, and a different box perhaps RM3. So they have to take the amount that they are willing to pay and cross the amount that they are not willing to pay. So what is the risk of asking this question? We will also discuss this during the class time. So the next one, we call it single bounded dichotomous choice. So you will tell the respondents, if let's say the referendum support the project, it goes ahead and costs each person, for instance, RM1. And the amounts is actually varied across respondent. So they are asked to support or oppose the project. And in this case, large samples are actually needed. Okay, so the amounts are varied across different respondents. So for instance, in this area, you have many poor people. So you will give them the value of RM1. While in this area, you have a medium people. Perhaps you will ask RM2. While this elite area, you will ask them to pay perhaps RM5. Okay, so this is called as single bounded dichotomous choice. So the next one, we call it double bounded dichotomous choice. So if respondents say yes to one value, so perhaps you will increase the number into another value. If let's say they say no to the first value, then you will decrease the value. For instance, you ask them, okay, so are you willing to pay for 1 ringgit? If let's say they say yes, then you will increase the value. Are you willing to pay for 2 ringgit? If let's say you ask the first question, are you willing to pay for 1 ringgit? They say no, then you have to decrease the value. Are you willing to pay for 50 cent? Okay, so basically double bounded dichotomous choice is more efficient than single bounded given the course of your survey, and definitely different methods will produce different results. So you have to do definitely pilot study. Okay. Analyzing the responses. Should we use mean or medians to analyze the willingness to pay? So the theory suggests that we have to use the mean. However, two arguments actually support the use of median. The first one is that the medians is less sensitive to outliers. If let's say we are dealing with large or small number, basically the mean will be biased. Second, majority supports in a democratic system. So in practice, basically we will present both answers using mean as well as median. So in the case of open-ended question, finding the means and medians are very straightforward. However, when we are talking about closed-ended question, we have to use parametric estimation using random utility models or random expenditure model function. Using logit or probit model, we can also use non-parametric estimation, which is known as Turnbull estimator. Okay? For the aggregation, it's quite easy. So you can use mean or medians of willingness to pay. And then if the sample is representative of your population, so the population here is our capital N. So you can just multiply your willingness to pay with the population. How about if the sample is not representative? So in this case, for instance, our female is 50% and male is also 50%. So we have to take the weighted sum across each subgroup, and then you have to multiply with your willingness to pay. Okay? There are a few types of validity. The first one is phase validity. So you have to check, does your survey ask the right question about the right scenario? If let's say your question are vague, definitely its credibility will be low. If there are many protest votes, definitely you have to be skeptical about your result. The second one is convergent validity. In this case, you have to compare your result. If let's say you are using CVM, you should compare with other valuation method, for instance choice experiments. So does your result are similar or different from each other? Okay, and the last one, you have to check for theoretical validity. In this case, you have to check, does the coefficient sign that you have collected from your result basically consistent with the theory or your priori expectation when you done your regression analysis. Okay, so you have to check all these three validity. These are some problems that you may face when you design the contingent valuation method. The first one is hypothetical bias. Is the budget constraint respected? Sometimes your respondent may agree to whatever value that you propose to them, and this often leads to an upward bias. Second, you have strategic bias. So they believe that their answers will affect their tax payment and they may not be willing to say yes. So this may lead to downward bias. The next one is part-whole bias. So the result might indicate that the value of an owl is actually the same as the value of all birds in the park. Okay, so number 4, you have insensitivity to scope issues. So they may give similar result or similar values for a small project and a large project because they are very insensitive to the scope that you have given to them. And the next one is warm glow. So because they try to impress you or they try to impress the interviewer, so the responses are actually just a symbolic. Basically, they are not willing to pay for it, but they just wanted to impress the interviewer. And the next one is yay saying. So sometimes they just want to say yes to please the interviewer. Okay, and we also have interviewer bias. So interviewers' identity sometimes may affect the answers of the respondents. So a study showed that willingness to pay is actually higher if the interviewer dresses well. Okay, some of the problem may overlap to each other, but that's fine. Okay. We can also have prominence bias, the fact that your study is being conducted, making respondents believe that the issue is very important. And we can also have temporal embedding, so their willingness to pay does not vary with respect to frequency of payment. They could say, I would like to pay 100 ringgits or $100 once in a lifetime, or perhaps every year, or every month to save whatever animal. Okay? And the next one is framing. So their answers are very sensitive to how your question is being framed or worded. If let's say you frame it in such a way it looks very severe, so they may be willing to pay to whatever amounts that you propose to them, right? And the next one is information bias. When you don't have enough information, so they may not be able to express their preference because of your insufficient information provided to them. Okay. According to Hausman 2012, he's a very famous economist. I believe that respondents to contingent valuation survey are often not responding out of stable or well-defined preferences, but are essentially inventing their answers on the fly, in a way which makes the resulting data useless for serious analysis. Okay? This is the examples of CVM on the future management of Asian tiger mosquito in Australia. So it is just a survey of public preferences. So in the first page of your survey, you have to provide the introduction. And in the introduction, you have to thank your respondents for participating in your survey. You also have to mention them what your survey is all about. Okay, the objective of your study. And you have to tell them how many minutes they need to take to complete the survey. Okay, you also have to mention that what you will do with the survey data. In this case, they mentioned that the survey will be used to plan for future managements of the Asian tiger mosquito. Okay, you also have to provide that or mention that all the information that you have collected from them will be strictly confidential. Okay, and lastly, you have to provide your detail so that your respondents can contact you anytime or if let's say they have problem to answer your question. Okay. This is just the examples of this survey. This survey has 4 sections. So the first section asks about the information of your respondents. The second section is about the information of the Asian tiger mosquito. So what's the problem with this mosquito? It could impact basically human health as well as their well-being. And section 3, you have to ask about their preferences, in this case on the future management program to help to prevent the Asian tiger mosquito from entering the Queensland area. And section 4, you have to ask the follow-up question. Okay? As I mentioned in the previous slide, in section 2, you have to tell the information about the Asian tiger mosquito. Many people may not know what is this mosquito. So you have to tell the backgrounds of this mosquito, where it's come from, and so on. So in Asia, Asian tiger mosquito is called as Aedes. Okay, so you have to give a bit of backgrounds of this mosquito so that people may know what are we talking about. Okay. You should also tell the impacts of being bitten by the Asian tiger mosquito. In this case, we will have the health impacts such as fever and spreadness of the virus. Okay, and you can also include images if you like to. Okay, when we tell them the impacts of having this Asian tiger mosquito, so people will know what should they do to prevent or to get rid of this mosquito if let's say the impact is very serious. You should also tell them what is the current conditions with regards to the Asian tiger mosquito. In this case, the Australian governments are taking measures to stop the Asian tiger mosquito from coming to mainland Australia. So we can say with those government programs in place, the chance of the Asian tiger mosquito becoming established in Australia within the next 5 to 10 years is around 50%. However, here you have to somehow propose your own solution. You can say here the government could do more. For instance, these are some of the programs that you are planning to propose to your respondents. So these extra programs definitely could reduce the probability of the Asian tiger mosquito becoming established in Australia to 15%. So with the government's program, the current government programs, so the chances of this mosquito being established is around 50. But now because of your program, so definitely you will introduce extra program, and this extra program could reduce the chances of this mosquito to be established in Australia. Okay, so you have to come out with your own proposed program as well. You should ask questions with regard to willingness to pay for your proposed program. In this case, they ask, would your household be willing to pay $20 per year? Okay, through the annual tax for the extra mosquito control programs described above to reduce the chance of the Asian tiger mosquito from becoming established in Australia from 50% to 15%. Okay, so they can say yes or no. So in this question, what they did was they gave different values to different household. Certain household will give the value of $10, while a certain household will get the value of 20. It depends on the level of the household. Some household who are living in the elite area may be willing to pay for more amounts. Okay, so they are subjected, they are given a higher value. Okay, they also ask this question: what is the most that your household will be willing to pay per year? Because sometimes if let's say they are given a certain value, for instance $20, but they are willing to pay for more. So this question tackle this problem. If let's say they are willing to pay for more, so they ask what is the most amount that your household will be willing to pay per year. Okay, so you can also ask this kind of question to cater for their willingness to pay for your proposed program. If they are not willing to pay anything, you have to ask them what is the reasons why they are not willing to pay for it. Perhaps they cannot afford to pay the amount that you have proposed to them. Perhaps the problem is not their priority, or maybe they don't have the problem with the mosquito, or they are satisfied with the current services provided by the government, or they didn't want to pay extra or additional tax, and many other reasons. And don't forget to put one part or one item for others and specify the reason, because sometimes we may not know what is their reasons for not paying for this proposed project. So just give a blank space so that they can state their own reason. Okay. The second valuation method is choice experiment. Here, respondents are presented with a number of discrete alternatives in terms of a set of attributes, and then they are asked to state which sets of attributes that they prefer. One of the alternatives is status quo or business as usual. It means that there is no changes being made to the current condition. And one of the attributes is cost of choosing a given alternatives. So the researcher can then calculate the trade-off between attributes and the amounts that they are willing to pay for it. So in other words, the researcher can calculate the implicit value of some project attributes. For instance, the area of wetland. So choice experiment is actually has growing in popularity because it can deal with the non-use values. It can also avoid the yes saying. Okay, and the monetary value in choice experiment is also implicit. So we don't have to ask them straight away how much are you willing to pay for the improvements in the environmental quality. Okay, and choice experiment can calculate the marginal valuations of the attributes. Let's look at the examples of choice experiments. So Macquarie was the largest wetland area in New South Wales, but the use of water for irrigation decreased the size of wetland from 5,000 to 1,000 square kilometers. Consequently, the frequency of waterbird breeding events has fallen from every year to every 4 years, and the number of endangered waterbird species has fallen from 34 species to 12 species. So a choice experiment questionnaire was developed to value a project to allocate more water to Macquarie by purchasing water rights from the farmers via one-off tax. Okay, here you can see the attributes. The first attribute is your water rate payment, which is just one-off payment, and then you have irrigation related employment, wetland area, waterbird breeding, as well as protected species. So you are also given a few options. Option 1 is the status quo, option 2 and option 3. So for the option 1, there is nothing changed here. So you don't have to pay for your water rate payment, so no changes here. How about the irrigation related employment? So you are creating 4,400 from this irrigation employment, and the wetland area is 1,000 kilometers squared, and the waterbird breeding is every 4 years, and you can protect only 12 species. How about if you go to option 2? For the option 2, you are willing to pay $20 one-off payment. So what happened to the irrigation related employment? So basically the job created may decrease from 4,400 to 4,350, and the wetland area has increased from 1,000 to 1,250. And the water breathing, instead of every 4 years, you can have every 3 years. And you can also protect 25 species instead of 12 species. And if you go for option 3, definitely you are willing to pay for more money, and you are actually maintaining the employment job created instead of 4,400 to 4,350. Okay, the same as the option 2. However, the wetland area is increased, okay, from 1,000 to 1,650, and instead of every 4 years to have water breathing event, you can have every years. And here in the option 2, you can protect 25 species, but in option 3, you can only protect 15 species, but your waterbird breathing event is every year. So you have to choose which option that you like to have. Okay, so this is how they design it. So you are given a few options and a different range of payment with different attributes. Okay, so your respondent would say, I will choose option 1 if they didn't want to pay anything, or perhaps they wanted to choose option 2 or 3, or maybe they don't want to choose anything because they are the one who involved in the irrigation related employment. So it's up to them. Okay, if let's say they are involving in the irrigation process, so they may prefer for more water. Okay. When you design the questionnaire, you have to consider less than 5 attributes. Otherwise, your respondent will face this brain explode. Why is that? Because you are given them a few options, and under that option you have a few attributes. If the attributes are too many, so they will face difficulty in choosing all these attributes given a few options. Okay, and attributes can actually take continuous or discrete values. In choosing the choice set, make sure that you have to avoid dominated alternative. What does it mean? The choices that are worse over every attribute. And you also have to avoid the impossible alternative. It means that the choices that don't even make sense. For instance, you are saying you want to have less forest for developments, but it will give you more koala or more animals, which is doesn't make sense. Okay, and the software packages that can conduct choice experiment routine is SAS as well as SPSS. So you can also analyze your choice experiment using random utility model, which is using multinomial or conditional logic. Okay. Analyzing your data. So the utility function for a person is actually depends on the rates of payment, job creation from the irrigation, species, breeding events, as well as the wetland area. So our beta 1 has a negative relationship with the utility. Definitely if you want to pay for something, it will reduce your utility. Job creation, species, breeding events, as well as the wetland area will have a positive relationship with our utility. Okay, so the marginal willingness to pay, or we call it implicit price, for an additional species. So additional species is beta 3. So it will look like this. Negative because your beta 1 is negative, negative beta 3 over beta 1. So beta is our coefficient. If you want to look at in terms of units, so beta 3 is utils over, let me write it here, utils over breathing events, and beta 1 is util over dollar. If you want to divide these two, you will get the value of dollar over breathing events. Okay, so basically this is the amount that you have to pay to get additional breathing event. So the willingness to pay for a specific policy package is negative. So V1 is actually our utility after the policy being introduced minus V0, or we can say the utility before the policy being introduced over the beta 1. Definitely we have to divide it with beta 1 because this is the rate of payment. Okay, so this is utility of package and status quo, and you will get the value of willingness to pay for a specific policy package. There are some drawbacks of choice experiments, so your respondent need to have some concentration and understanding in answering your questionnaire. So the complexity in designing your questionnaire can lead to some inconsistency in your results. So perhaps your respondent just give the answer to hurry it along because you have designed so many attributes, so they just wanted to make it quick and just take whatever they would like to take. Okay, so these are some of the possible drawbacks of having choice experiment method. Travel cost is one of the environmental valuation method. So users of an environmental goods pay a price in terms of the travel cost incurred when they visit a certain place. So when no one spends anything to get there, marginal utility of visitation is zero. People won't make an extra trips if there is no additional value to them from the visit. So living different distances from the park will have a different prices. If let's say you are living closer to the park area, definitely your price is smaller compared to those who are living far away from the park. So the assumption for the travel cost is that people react to a change in the travel cost in the same way they would react to a change in the admission price. So travel cost method allows estimations of demand curve which can be used to compute the consumer surplus. Okay? There are a few types of the travel cost methods. Let's compute the travel cost using the zonal method. So the first steps that you have to do is you have to define the zones surrounding the recreational sites. Let's assume that this star is your recreational site. So your zone is zone 1, zone 2 as well as zone 3. Second, you have to collect the information on the annual number of visitors from each zone using your survey. Number 3, you have to calculate the visitation rate. So how to calculate it? The number of visits from each zone divided with the population of that zone. Number 4, you have to use standard value per unit distance traveled and per units of time, and then you also have to calculate the return trip travel cost from each zone. Number 5, you have to estimate the visitation rate or the trip generation function. So your visitation rate or the number of visit is a function of travel cost as well as time and the socio-economic characteristics of your respondents. Okay, so here are the definitions of each of the short form. Okay, so number 6, you have to aggregate all the zones to get a demand curve. So iterations of this equation will allow the estimations of pseudo demand function. Okay, so number 7, the total economic benefits of the site is basically equals to your demand curve area. If you look at here, okay, so this is your demand curve. This is the total cost or travel cost. This is the number of visit. Okay, so this is actually representing each zone. So if you look at zone 1, so zone 1, you have so many visits because the travel cost is actually very cheap, right? It is here. That's why you have many number of visits. If you look at zone 3, because it is far away, so the travel cost is expensive and the number of visits is also lesser compared to zone 1. Okay? Travel cost method is not free from weaknesses. The first one is that the prices of substitute good should be included in your demand function, but this is difficult to do. For instance, when we talk about the recreational sites, you may also have a few sites, right? And if you want to include all their prices in your equation, it will be hard to estimate your equation. Second, you may also face with the problems of multi-purpose trips. For instance, you are saying that you want to go to Langkawi Island because you want to enjoy the nice scenery in Langkawi. However, in Langkawi, you may also have your family's house or your friend's house, or you may also want to enjoy the shopping place in Langkawi. So basically, in this case, it is hard to decide or to distinguish what is the price of environmental good to you. Okay, so my question is, can this issue be controlled for by a dummy? So we will discuss this question in our class time. Okay, next, opportunity cost of times varies between people. For some people, the price or the value of 1 hour worth like 10 ringgit for them. But for some people, 1 hour worth 100 ringgit. So different people will have different value for their opportunity cost of time. Okay, so if people really love a site, perhaps they will choose to move closer to the site, right? And basically, for the travel cost, it can only estimate the use value. So if let's say you are talking about something that you haven't experienced with, so the travel cost cannot do that. Okay, so for the travel cost, the estimates are also biased. If let's say the access to the site is congested, so this is very common for travel costs. This is the examples of questionnaire using the travel cost method. So in this survey, they want to estimate the use values associated with the change in environmental health of the river. So in the first page of your questionnaire, you have to introduce yourself. You have to tell the purpose or the objective of your study. Okay, and if let's say they are willing to spare their time to answer your question, you have to thank them. If let's say they are not willing to spend their time to answer your question, you shouldn't bother them. Okay, for the travel cost method, these are some of the useful information that you should get from your respondent. So the first one is that in which suburbs or town do you usually live? You can ask about their suburb as well as the postcode. So why do we have to ask this question or information? Because it will tell us the distance from their house to the site. And the next question, how far is it from where you live to here or to the site? So you can ask in terms of kilometers. How long did it take you to travel here today? So the information will give us in terms of the hours that they have taken to go to the site. Next, how did you get here? Is it using car, bus, and so on? Okay, so you can also ask, the next question is question number 5. Not including your cost of getting here, what other costs have you incurred in your visit to this site? Okay, so you also wanted to know what other costs that they have incurred when they travel to the site. So please include things like bait, entry fee, parking fees, and so on. So these are all included as your travel costs. Okay. The next question you can ask, including yourself, how many adults and how many children came here with you today? So why do you have to separate between adults and children? So for the case of entrance fees and many other things, the price for the adults and children are different. That's why we have to separate them. Okay, the next question is that, is your visit here the sole purpose of your trip away from where you live? So why do we have to ask this question? Because you want to solve or you want to address the issue of multi-purpose trips. And the next question, how important is your visit here relative to the other things you are doing on these trips? So in this case, you want to know their preference on the river. Okay, And the last one, you can also ask what is the main recreational activities you are doing or you are undertaking on your visit here. So this will tell the use value of the river to your respondents. Okay. So the next question they also ask in the past 12 months, how many times have you been here? So why do they ask this question? They want to know the importance of the river to the respondents. Okay, next I would like you now to think about how often you will come here if the overall conditions of the river decline. So they show the cards with the conditions of the river has been declined. So what will be the reactions or the behavior of the respondents? Okay, and then they also ask, now I would like you to think about how often you would have come here if the river's condition was improved. Okay, why do they ask this question? Because they want to know the demands of the improved river. Okay, so they also give a card to show that the conditions of the river has been improved. Okay, so you can also ask this kind of question. The next environmental valuation method is averting expenditure. Before I explain what is averting expenditure, let me start with averting behavior. So averting behavior is just any protective action taken or response with the intention to avoid or reduce pollution emission. For instance, we are facing with air pollution. So what should we do? Definitely we have to purchase masks, right? So as pollution damages the environment, people incur everything expenditure. So in this case, we are facing air pollution. So we purchase the mask and the cost of purchasing mask is called as everything expenditure. So why do we have to do that? Because we want to improve our personal environmental quality. So this is one of the examples of study that use everything expenditure method. So Abdullah et al. 1992 have tried to measure economic costs of groundwater contamination in Pennsylvania. So the estimated everything expenditure from purchase of bottled water, water treatment systems and boiled water were about $61,000 to $131,000. Okay. Now, this is the time for the class exercise. Okay, please give me one examples of everything behavior with respect to environmental good. Think about it and we will discuss it during the class time, okay? If you plan to use everything expenditure method, you may face the problem with joiners of production. So some everything expenditure yield benefits other than those from improving the environmental quality. For instance, when you purchase air conditioning, it may not only filter your air quality, it can also provide comfort to you, right? Therefore, the benefit estimate can also be biased. According to the hedonic price method, the price of a particular goods depends on its characteristics. Therefore, we can use the information on property prices to value the environmental goods, such as noise or pollution in that area. So, if you look at this equation, the price of a particular house depends on its structural characteristics, neighborhood characteristics, as well as the environmental quality. So, what is the structural characteristics of the house? It's like the number of rooms, size of the house, and the age of the house. So in this case, the larger the size of the house, the higher the price of the house. And the more the number of room of the house, definitely the higher the price of the house. Right. And neighborhood characteristics is like the crime rate, distance from the city and other facilities. While the environmental characteristics is like the air or water quality. Okay. Coefficients of environmental variable, or we can say partial derivative, will reflect the effects of that characteristics on the house price. We call it implicit price. So the implicit price is the benefits of a 1 unit increase in the non-marketed environmental characteristics. And the implicit price is also the marginal cost of buying a unit of environmental quality. So you have to take note that if the hedonic price function is linear, so the implicit price is constant. So the marginal benefits should equal to the marginal cost as well as equals to implicit price for all levels of environmental quality. Okay. There are a few challenges if you want to use hedonic price method. Definitely it is not easy because it requires complex empirical modeling. If you want to use it, you have to be good in econometric. It also requires extensive data, and you may also face with multicollinearity issues. For instance, okay, you may have noise and air pollution, and these pollution are actually correlated to the proximity to the traffic. Okay, so you will have this multicollinearity issue. So it is hard to separate the effects of this pollution with the proximity to the traffic. And you may also have a problem when you want to find or decide the functional form. Should you use linear-linear, or should you use linear-nonlinear, or non-linear-nonlinear? So you have to determine to decide what kind of functional form to be used, and what are the variable and how many variable will affect your housing price. For instance, you know that there are many factors or characteristics that will determine your housing price. So what are they and how many variables that you want to include to determine the changes in the housing price? Okay, it will be a challenge for you. There are also other valuation techniques for the environmental good, which will not be covered in this chapter, such as production function technique, payment for environmental service, and benefit transfer. So basically you can just click on this link and you can look at them in detail if you like to. Okay. We will discuss this exercise during the class times. So if you look at the first image, we will have a problem with the logging issues, right? And then the second image is on the solid waste generation, which is very common in many Asians or developing countries. And the third one is on water pollution. And the last image on the preservations of this species or koala. Okay, so how can we put a value or price tags on them? Okay, so you have to think what kind of environmental valuation method that are suitable to analyze all these issues. Okay, think about it and we will discuss soon. Wait, but why do we have to know environmental valuation techniques? As an economist, do you think that it is important for us to learn them? Okay, think about it and we will discuss it during the class time. For your assignments, let's play with the real housing data and do some regression. Okay, everyone? I would like to thanks to Paul Burke and Jeff Bennett for sharing their information in this lecture. Okay?